Okay, testing again. Come on. Testing, testing. I'm seeing a signal. Just not hearing anything yet. Testing, testing. Okay, we got audio. John, you put that to your balance.
All right, tell me when to go.
Good luck. Go first.
All right. Well, good evening, everybody. Thanks for coming out tonight. And those of you who are watching on, well, we're not Zooming anymore. We're on Facebook, right? YouTube. Oh, thank you. Those of you who are watching on YouTube, thanks. Before we introduce our speaker, a couple things to let you know about. Number one, we will be doing a creation calendar again this year. And this is the front cover. And the theme this year is God's creativity on display in the animal kingdom. And it'll be a little bit unique because what we'll do is on each image, we'll have a few fun facts, but there'll be a QR code that you can zap and you can see a 5-minute presentation on each one of the animals. So it'll be a little bit unique. And Steve, if you haven't been contacted yet, you'll be doing a couple of them. So, we're still working on that, but we'll put those on sale probably sometime late October. And what we always do is you sign up for it, and then we print them first part of December, and then we distribute them. Reminder that at New Community Church in Wildwood, November 22nd and 23rd, we are having a creation weekend, which will be Friday night and Saturday morning. Just as a point of information, we start this Friday teaching how many weeks is it, Denny? In Warrenton? 8 weeks. We're teaching 8 weeks of classes to a homeschool group in Warrenton. We're excited about that. We also are in planning for a second video called Another Day Over Coffee. If you saw One Day Over Coffee, this one will be Scott coming back to me and hitting me with all the tough questions. So I'm thinking about having Steve sit in for me. We're also doing, and Zach, you might be able to give us a little bit of information on this. I know Dan is working on a follow-up to Missouri's Mastodon Graveyard. He's hoping to have it done by the end of the year. So you've got that all filmed and ready? Zach?
Yes.
Okay. All right. And our newest podcast just went up. We have 2 of them with Dr. Joel Brown that actually Steve and I did with him and interviewed him. This most recent one was on DNA. Really, really interesting. So you can get to our podcast through our website. Tonight, everything on that table over there is $4 except for 2 things. Number one, we're selling this rock solid Bible curriculum that was put together by Creation Ministries. It's a 33-week curriculum. It starts at Genesis, ends in Revelation. It is very well done. There's a teacher's manual, PowerPoint for every lesson. We're selling these for $99. I think if you go online with CMI, they're $119. So if you're interested, come and talk to me. The other one is we are selling the devotional by itself for $5. But if you want to buy it with a notebook to take notes, you read the devotion and then kind of write your thoughts down. That one's $10. So tonight, oh, I'm sorry, one last thing. If you're not on our email list but would like to be, there's a clipboard on the table there. So just give us your name and email address. We're not going to bug you asking you for money or anything like that. You're just going to find out when we have something going on. Lastly, Zoo Day is full. September 30th, October 1st, we're completely full. We've got no more spots open. So tonight I get to introduce John Kaufman. John is a beekeeper from Antonia, Missouri. He learned beekeeping from his grandfather, Claude, who began beekeeping in the late 1940s. John's also a student at Brooks Bible College pursuing a degree in theology, and John also works at Brooks Bible College. So John says when the Lord saved him in 2018, his greatest struggle was believing the Bible was what it said about creation. And John got to know us. He came to a big event we had at Concordia Seminary in 2019. And he says when the Lord provided help in many ways to help with the struggle, but two of the most important were Missouri Association for Creation and observing the beauty and complexity of honeybees. So tonight, John's going to give us a glimpse into what he's observed. And he likes to quote Lorenzo Langstroth, the father of modern beekeeping, who wrote, "The Creator may be seen in all the works of his hands, but in few more directly than in the wise economy of the honeybee." So let's welcome John Kaufman.
I don't like microphones.
John, you don't need it. It's not
I
working.
don't need it?
Yep, I got you on the camera.
All right,
So set it down.
set it down.
You mean I needed a microphone and he don't?
It was turned off.
I don't like microphones, but I'm normally very soft spoken, so I normally need one. But I hope you all will be able to hear me well. Now, Marv said that all the things on that table are $5. Now, I have my table over there, and if you saw it walking in, I have, I have a beehive set up over there for you to take a look at. And sitting next to it, I pulled out of there a frame with a nice piece of comb on there that you can just examine. Sitting on top, I have some of my beekeeping tools that feel free to take a look at them, examine them. I've also got a whole bunch of pictures over there that are high quality things. I don't know where I got them. I think they're something my grandfather had, but they're high quality pictures from Dedan, which is a good beekeeping comment. Yes, those. And then I've also got sitting next to it some bottles of honey. And so those, I sell those, but since I like all of you people, they're free. If you want to give a gift to help, cover the cost of taking care of the bees, I would appreciate it, but they're free. And I have more than what's on the table if we run out. And then also, if you have kids or you are a kid, I have these. They're fun little coloring books and activity books that teach you about bees and beekeeping. And I had these when I was a little kid, and I enjoyed them. Anyway, let me start by praying because I need that. Father, thank you for bringing us all here today to look at a marvelous piece of your creation. And Father, I pray that this wouldn't just be a lecture about honeybees, but that this would drive us all to worship you, to be in awe of your marvelous power, your divine attributes. Father, I just pray that we would walk away from here having a new love for a unique part of your creation. Father, help me to remember all the things that I plan to say, and help me to remember the things I plan to say but shouldn't. Just help me to be your instrument, Lord. Pray this in Jesus' name, amen. Amen. All right, so a little bit about myself. Marv introduced me. My name is John Kaufman. I am a beekeeper. I hope I don't disappoint you. I'm not a scientist. I'm not a master beekeeper. I'm not certified in any way whatsoever. I have kept bees for 6 years, I think. And then, but I come from a family where beekeeping is just a part of life. I can't really say it better than that. Growing up, anyone in the family during the springtime or the summer, on the weekends, they were out working with the bees. In the fall, the biggest event that the whole family had to look forward to, was extracting honey in September, and it was a holiday for us. So this has really been ingrained into my life since I was born. And I wasn't raised in a Christian household. My grandparents were Catholic. My other set of grandparents were Catholic. And my father, when he went through 12 years of Catholic school, and he saw how ridiculous it was and how that it did not lead to anything worthwhile. And so he became sort of an atheist. And that's what I was raised with. I was raised, Carl Sagan, Neil deGrasse Tyson, those sorts of guys, those were my teachers. Naturalism, that could well describe what I believed. And when I got into high school, I got into a sort of a hostile state towards anything but that. I thought, well, if this is the truth, if the universe is just a cause, is just a happy accident, then I need to follow that to its logical conclusion. And everything that I was being taught by all the people online and books I read were saying that, well, us as humanity, we're in danger because we've got all our eggs in one basket, and all it takes is one rock going a little too fast in the wrong place to kill all of us. And so I thought, well, that needs to be everyone's focus, is making humanity an interplanetary species. And I'm getting to bees, but this is important to why bees are important to me. And because of that, I thought, well, anything that is hindering us from that cause is, it needs to be taken care of. And in high school, that even took the form of me thinking that people with mental handicaps and things like that were less than human. People like my sister. I wasn't planning on going around killing people, but I thought that they were less than human. I thought that they brought nothing to society, and that it wouldn't be the worst thing if they were wiped out. That's where I was, and that's where looking at the world, looking at creation, looking at the stars in the night sky from a naturalistic point of view, that's where that brought me. And then through the providence of the Lord, he put a family in my life that loved him very much. And several of them made it their mission to just put the gospel continually before me. And the Lord saved me. Amen. And as Marv was saying, the most difficult thing for me, because I wanted consistency, was I opened my Bible to the very beginning, and I read what it said about creation, and I thought, okay, Jesus is my Lord, he's my King, and I know that this book is his word, it's truth from him. But everything I've ever been taught says that that's just silly. And so one of the men that made it their mission to put the gospel continually before me, he's my best friend to this day. His name is Joel. And he is a machine when it comes to creation apologetics. And whenever I had a question, he either had an answer or he said, let me get back to you. And that's what he did. And with this family, I took a vacation with them to the Creation Museum and to the Ark. And it started to click that, okay, these creationists, maybe they've got something. Maybe there is some truth here. Because all these people, they seem to be just as qualified, if not more qualified, than the people I've listened to my entire life. And then I came back, and there was an event at Concordia Seminary held by Missouri Association for Creation. And I went there, and I met, who did I meet? It was Carl Kirby, and it was Steve Austin, and
Rob Carter.
Who was the other guy? Helmut Welke, is that his name?
Yeah.
I met him.
Yeah.
And again, it all just, I wasn't convinced to the point that I had an answer for everything, but who is? But it showed that this is a reasonable thing to believe. And I trust Scripture with everything, every ounce of my being. And where I don't, I hope to change that. But this showed that, this Bible, the greatest stumbling block I had to believe in this Bible, there was a perfectly good explanation for believing it just as it says. And so that's why this stuff is important to me. I know that was a long way of introducing myself, but that's why, actually, the next thing is bees. That's why we're here. I started keeping bees around that time, myself personally, after having been raised watching them. And I would go out there and I'd sit and watch the entrance of my beehives in the morning, and I'd watch them carry in the pollen. And I'd watch all the different bright colors that they carry in, and I'd open them up, and I'd see the marvelous structure that we're going to look at tonight. I'd see the beautiful combs that they built with such perfect shapes, and I was just blown away. And I saw how delicate these creatures were, and I just realized there's no possible way that these things could have just come to be by an accident, or even survived this long. And that's not a proof, a 100% proof for our point of view, but it really helped. And it drove me to worship God far more for what he had made. And so anyway, honeybees. And then, let's see, that's me. I introduced you to me already. But this picture is really special to me. My grandfather, he kept bees for 7 years before he died and taught me everything he knew. And he died a few years ago. But that's me, and that's him, my first year of beekeeping. And we were going through that hive, and I think that was the only one that survived that winter. But anyway, Marv also mentioned I like to quote Lorenzo Langstroth. And I'm going to quote him quite a bit because he was a really phenomenal man. And he says in his book, The Hive and the Honeybee, which I have sitting over there, and you can take a look at it, I have determined writing this book to give facts, however wonderful, just as they are, confident that in due time they will be universally received, and hoping that many wonders of the economy of the honeybee will not only excite a wider interest in its culture, and this is what's important, but lead those who observe them to adore the wisdom of him who gave them such admirable instincts. And that's what I want to do tonight. And I'm not going to give you the, really high up intellectual reasons for why honeybees just wipe out all other arguments than six-day creationism. I'm not going to do that. I'm not even going to come close to doing that. What I am going to do is I'm going to show you that these creatures are marvelous, and you should just be in awe of our Creator's hand in them and what he's done with them. And so what we're looking at, it's delayed, is the European honeybee, Apis mellifera, don't know how to say it, but it's just the common honeybee. You see them on flowers in your yard, and you might not even give them that much mind. But as we're going to see, they're marvelous. They are a social bee. They're a social insect. So a lot of the bees that you see, especially the big ones, like the carpenter bees, the mason bees, things like that, they're solitary bees. Each bee that you see lives on its own. And if you ever see like the bee houses that they sell at Home Depot, they're a bunch of little tubes or little straws. That's because each bee lives in its own little tube. They live together, but they're on their own. Honeybees aren't like that. And this is a picture I took at a bee removal I did. They all live together. They work together as one unit. They in many ways act as one organism, the hive itself. And you've got many parts to a beehive. The building block of the beehive is the comb. And this is a picture I took. That's a picture I found on the internet. But it's just the wax. They build it by hanging on to one another. They hang on to something that's above them, and they hang on to each other, and they eat nectar. And when they eat nectar from flowers, they have these glands on their bellies that produce wax. And so as they eat their nectar, they pull the little wax platelets off of them, and they hand it to the bees above them, and those bees hand it to the bees above them while pulling the wax off their own bellies, and they form it into these marvelous little hexagons. And they build these wonderful things. And for each pound of this wax, this is all made out of beeswax here, not the wooden frame, it takes 8 pounds of honey to make 1 pound of that beeswax. And so in the beehive, you have several different parts. And if you take the time to look at that beehive back there when we're done, there are 2 boxes. There's a big one and there's a little one. The bottom box over there, the heart and core of a bee colony is the brood. And so, I think I can point. These are baby bees. In fact, and we'll look at this later, these are baby worker bees. And all the way over here, if you were able to see it, because it's really small, there are little grains of rice in these over here. They look like grains of rice. And those are eggs. And the queen lays an egg in each of these cells. And you can see the whole range of development. I got this online because it was so good. I had to use it. But the egg is there, and then you got the larva. And then when the larva starts to become a pupa, they cover it with wax. And so that's the heart and core. It's the brood chamber. And within the brood chamber, it's sort of a football shape. And that's why I took this picture. Because here, I wish it were a little bigger, but you can see the brood is right there. It's right in the very center, and above it they put the honey. And so there's a distinct shape and order to all beehives. I can go into any beehive, and I do. Part of what I do is I go around St. Louis and I find bees that are living in people's homes, and I cut them out of there. And so I see bees building hives, building combs the way they would naturally. And it's the same pattern everywhere you go. You got the brood in the center, and then you got a little trail of pollen right above it, and then you've got honey, a honey barrier right above that. And here are some better pictures. That's the pollen, and it looks kind of cakey because they actually they do something to it. I forget exactly. They pass it through their bellies or something, and it ferments, and we call that bee bread, and that's their protein. That's what they use to. That's what promotes brood. Baby bees being born is the pollen. That's their protein, and then here is honey. It's nice and pretty white, and the caps on top, because it's all covered in a wax cap, a thin wax cap, are they're sunk in a little bit, and they do that to keep the moisture content just right. And then the other thing that you see in the beehive that not many people know about is this. And this is a wooden frame that we use in beekeeping, but there's a little layer of gummy stuff right there. And that's called propolis. And it's glue. The bees make this from gathering sap from trees. And I have a little ball of it back there. And if you get a chance, smell it, because it's the most wonderful smell you will ever smell. But it's a thing, it's a glue that they put on everything. They seal up all of the little cracks to get just the right airflow. They'll seal up predators that get in. If a snail or a mouse gets in there, after it dies, they'll cover it in propolis so that it's not there aren't issues coming from that affect the health of the hive. It's filled with all sorts of good bacteria and enzymes that keep the bees healthy, and it's just a fascinating thing. And we're doing sort of a 10,000-foot flyover here, but if you want, you can ask me questions about it at the end. And so we looked at the comb and all the things that go in the comb. You got the brood, you got the honey, you got the pollen. But these are what do it. And so within a beehive, you have a caste system. And at the top, you have the queen. And she doesn't really rule the hive in the sense that you might think. In many ways, it's the workers that are doing a lot of the ruling. But the queen, she lays all of the eggs. She's the mother to all of the bees in the hive. There's only one queen per hive, almost like 99.999% of the time. And she is the heart of the hive. And this is the first queen that I raised myself. And it's the most beautiful queen I've ever seen. She has this sort of tiger striping on there. And then we have the drone. And he is, you can tell him because he's big and fat. He's the male. The queen is female, of course, because she lays all the eggs. The drone is the male. And he's big and fat and dumb. And his eyes meet together at the top. And we'll get to him in a little bit. But this is actually a picture. I think that's a Russian drone. I ordered a package of Russian bees. And then that's a worker. And the worker is, well, it's the workhorse of the hive. Everything that gets done is done by the worker bees, except for laying the eggs. Everything is done by the workers. They're very clean. They clean everything. And any bees, anything that dies in the hive, they drag it out. And we'll get to it later, their whole life cycle, but all the foraging, all the food that comes in, the baby bees are taken care of by the workers. And there's all a natural order to the way in which they do their jobs. And we'll see that here in a little bit. Actually, this bee is from a bigger picture that I took of a swarm that I caught in Concord Plaza. And so, and I wish this were bigger. This is one of the best charts I've ever seen on the life cycle of honeybees. And does this have a pointer on it? No. Okay, I'll just use my finger. So over here, you have the chart that covers the life cycle of the worker honeybee. And so the worker honeybee, remember those grains of rice I was showing you earlier in the comb? The worker bee starts her life as an egg, a fertilized egg. and I'll get to why they're unfertilized eggs in a second. But she starts her life as a fertilized egg, laid in her own cell. She doesn't have to share it with any siblings, and she lives as an egg for 3 days. Day 1, the egg is sticking straight up. Day 2, it's leaning over a little bit. Day 3, the egg is lying straight on its side on the floor of the cell. And then day 4, the egg hatches. And it spends, day 6 or day 3, or excuse me, actually that's the wrong part of the chart. They spend a very long time. The next, here it is, day 4 through day 21 as a larva. Excuse me, I'm getting messed up. They spend day 4 through day 8 as a larva, as a little worm-looking thing in the cell that's getting fed by the other workers. And it's all the worker bees that are taking care of them. And then after day 9, they put a little wax capping over the worker bee. She gets covered. And that's when she becomes a pupa. She starts to look like a bee. She gets little red eyes and she's pale white. And then for the next, however many 9 to 21 is, she's developing. She's developing her wings. She's developing all her muscles. And she's becoming a full-grown worker bee. And then, and I have a picture of it back there, at the end of day 21, she chews through that little wax capping and she emerges from the cell. And her first job, and this is where this chart comes in, is her first job is she turns around and she cleans her cell. She gets all the little bits of dirt out of there. She gets all the droppings out of there, any waste that's in there whatsoever, until it's shiny clean. And you can actually tell, you can look at a frame of brood and you can see which ones were just emerged, and they're not quite clean yet. And then you can see ones that are shiny, and they're actually a little wet on the bottom that's ready for the queen to lay in there. And so her first job, she turns around and she cleans the cell. And then she goes around and she starts cleaning other cells just to make sure they're clean. And then her job is to keep other brood warm. And so brood, by the way, is another term for baby bees, in case I didn't cover that. So they're actually within the comb that holds all the brood. There are cells that are left empty on cold days for newborn bees to go in there. They climb in the cell and they move around, and they have special muscles here on their back just for producing heat, and they keep their younger sisters warm. And then after they graduate from being a brood warmer, then they go around and they start feeding all of the other larvae. They feed the older ones, the ones that are just about to get a cap put on there, and then they start feeding the younger ones. And then their job is to start building comb and transporting food around the hive. The foragers come in and they take the food and the nectar that they bring in, and they start passing it to other bees of that same age. And they pass it back and forth, and that's how we get honey. It gets all those enzymes in there that are good, and then they put the honey in the cell. And then after that, at day 18, their job is to guard the front entrance. They keep any other bees from other hives that might want to come by and steal their food away. They keep pests, they keep mites out, things like that. And they just sit there at the entrance and they protect the hive. And then after that, their job is to be a forager. The bee ends her life by working herself to death, and especially in July or in the summer months. She goes from flower to flower to flower, and she'll fly many, many, many miles. I don't even know what the number is, but it's a lot. A bee will fly anywhere up to 3 miles away from her, or 3 to 5 miles away from her home in a day. And in the peak of summer, a worker honeybee, she'll live about 2 weeks because she'll work herself to death. And so up to 3 to 5 miles away, and she makes several trips a day. And so I can't give you an exact number, but you can get the picture from that. They are constant workers. And that's another thing that I found just marvelous about them when I was observing them as a young believer. Anyway, the worker bee, so they work themselves to death. And in the wintertime, they don't work themselves to death. They don't live 2 weeks. In the wintertime, they live about 3 months. And their only job is to keep the hive warm, but we'll get to that. Now, here's the fun part. The drone. So the drone is a male bee. And what's really interesting is that the drone starts out his life as an unfertilized egg. which I don't know how it works. I'm still reading up about that. But I can tell you that a male bee can be produced from a sexually immature worker bee if there is no queen. A male bee, a drone, can be produced from a dying queen that has no sperm left. It's sort of the last-ditch effort to save the genetics of a hive sometimes, is producing drones. But he starts out his life as an unfertilized egg, and his cells are a little bigger because, like he said, he's a little he has a little more heft to him, and he takes way longer. He takes 24 days in the cell, and after he emerges, he walks around the hive, bumbling around. They're very clumsy, and I can't show it to you because it's just, you have to see it to believe it. They bumble themselves around and they bump into things. It's really funny. But after 10 days of walking around the hive, letting their wings get stretched out and getting fed by the worker bees, because they're so dumb and they're so clumsy, they can't feed themselves. They have to have worker bees feeding them. At 10 days old, they become sexually mature. And that's when their only job starts. Their only job after that 10 days is every afternoon. If it's nice outside, they'll fly out. And they'll go to these areas that no one understands, called drone congregating areas. All the drones from that area will pick a place, common place to assemble. No one understands why or how they choose those places, how they know to go to those spots. It's still a topic of a lot of research, and no one understands it. That book I have sitting on the counter there, it's not a Christian book by any means. It's a modern copy of the Hive and Honeybee. And in the topic of the drone congregating areas, it's a lot of, it seems, maybe, we think. It's amazing. But they go to these drone congregating areas and they fly around and they just kind of hang out. And their job is to wait for a queen, a virgin queen, to come by. And that's why their eyes are so big. The drones, they have huge eyes because their job is to spot a little tiny virgin queen flying near the drone congregating area so that he can go after her. But that's his only job. And so he flies out every day to try to mate with a virgin queen. And most drones, actually, they die of old age because they never get to have that happen. But they find a virgin queen, and the drone mates with the queen, and he, after 1 to 2 seconds, dies. His reproductive organs explode. And I read and I've heard of that it's true, that there's an audible popping sound when it happens. Yeah. But then his job is complete. So the drone, his only job is to carry on the genetic material of the colony. His only job is to mate with a queen. And he is dumb, he's big, he's clumsy, he can't even feed himself. I'm not trying to draw any parallels with but
Thank you.
at the end of his life, if he doesn't die of old age, or if he doesn't die mating with a queen, when winter comes, the workers push all the drones out of the hive and they don't let them back in because their job isn't needed during the winter. So all of the drone bees, they die. And it's on rare occasions you'll see drones that make it through the winter, but it's not common. Next thing, the queen. And queen bees are a beautiful thing to see. Excuse me. And so the queen is also a female. And the queen starts out her life as a fertilized egg, just like the worker. And really, any worker bee can become a queen from a young enough age. She has to start it off at a young enough age. But most of the time, a queen starts out her life as a fertilized egg laid in a special cell called a queen cup. It looks like a little bowl, an inverted bowl. And that's when they know they need to have a new queen. And so they force the queen to go over there and lay her successor. And then that queen will be drawn out into a queen cell, which looks like a little peanut. But the other option is if the queen dies unexpectedly, they can take a young worker bee larva. Usually, I think it's about 4 to 5 days old, and they can draw out an emergency queen cell from the normal little hexagonal cell that produces just your average worker bee. They can, if they need to, draw it out into a special cell and feed that larva a special diet, which will make it into a queen. And so the only difference between a worker bee and a queen bee is that at a young age, that larva or that egg was selected to be the next queen. And so she was raised with a little bit more care, and she was fed a special diet, a different diet than the worker bees, so that she would reach sexual maturity. So that's the difference. Queen bees are sexually mature females. Worker bees are they're not sexually mature. They're infertile. So she emerges from her cell, which looks like a little peanut, and I've got pictures later, after 16 days. And her first job is to go around and find any other queen cells, because they never just make one, because you're investing a lot of resources. You don't want to just have the whole hive die because you had all your eggs in one basket. She will go around and she'll find all of the other queen cells, all of her sisters that are going for the same job. And she'll chew a little hole in the side and she'll sting her to death because she doesn't want to have any competition. And during this time, the virgin queens, they'll actually go around and they have this way of communicating. And that's another area that no one really knows how the communication works, why they do it. They don't know what purpose it serves. But it's called piping. And it sounds, I don't even know how to describe the sound. It sounds like a car, like a really fast race car. And you step on the gas at idle and the engine revs up really high, but at a much higher pitch. It sounds like that. And then there's another thing called quacking. She'll go around and make a quacking sound. It's not quite like a duck, and it's not as easy to hear as the piping, but they'll go around and they'll just make these noises. No one really knows why, but they especially do the quacking when they're killing other queens. So maybe it's just, maybe they're just having a good time. I don't know. But after about 6 days of the queen, walking around, getting her flight muscles ready, stretching out her wings, being fed and nourished by the workers, she will start on her first mating flight. And so the queen, she only leaves the hive twice during her life. And the first is when she's going on a mating flight. So every afternoon, if it's a pleasant day, especially if it's warm and not much wind, she'll go out in the afternoon and she'll go to those drone congregating areas. Again, we don't know how they find it. It's just something that they know. It's suspected that maybe it's a hormonal thing or a pheromone that they release that the queen can smell. More research is needed here. But she will go to the drone congregating areas and she will mate with drones, several of them. I think I read it's about 15, but it helps to keep the genetics diverse, help keep from inbreeding. But she'll mate with about 15 drones, and the way it works is she during that mating flight, and maybe 2 or 3 mating flights until she has her until she's full. She'll mate with several drones, and she'll take the material that she receives from the drones, and she stores it in let's see, I forget how to pronounce it. The spermatheca. They're these little spherical organs that she has in her middle part, where she stores the sperm that she will use for her entire life. And that's also how she selects whether she's going to lay a drone, or a worker. She can selectively fertilize an egg, which is another fascinating thing. And I don't understand how it works. So there are people who do, but it's a fascinating, beautiful, unique thing. But yeah, she goes out and she mates, and she stores up all of the material that she needs for the rest of her life. And then she goes back to the hive. And that's where she stays, really for the rest of her life, with one exception. But here are the stages of a queen cell. And this isn't my chart. I took this from Carolina honeybees. But this is a queen cup. It looks like a little inverted bowl. As a beekeeper, if I see queen cups, and I'll especially see them after rainy days where they've been cooped up for a little while, I know I need to do something. But that's a queen cup. And then the queen will come by and she'll lay a little egg in there. And then they'll draw that queen cup out into a longer bowl until it's what looks like that. kind of looks like a peanut. And she'll remain in there for 16 days. And then she'll emerge. She'll chew a little flap out and she'll crawl out. And then that's when she'll go around and kill the other queens. But she'll spend the rest of her life in that hive because she has everything that she needs. She has the workers coming in to feed her, provide her nutrients. She has the workers to groom her, to take care of her. And her only job, really, well, actually, I guess she has two jobs, is to lay eggs. And some people say that she can lay 1,000 eggs a day. Some people say that she can lay 1,500 eggs a day. Some people say 2,000. Either way, it's a lot. It's more than her body weight in eggs a day. It's a mind-boggling amount. But that's what she does all day, every day. And her second job, and it's not talked about as much, her other job is to control the workers. And this is where her job is, her reign as queen comes into play. The queen is constantly secreting pheromones that, repress the laying desire of the workers. Because the workers, they can lay eggs. Like I said, they can lay unfertilized drone eggs if they have to. And you don't want that because they're messy and they don't do a good job of it. And it causes a lot of problems. The queen is constantly secreting a pheromone to suppress that trait in the workers. And as she gets older, she starts to run out of material to fertilize eggs. And her pheromone production sort of slows down too. And that's when you can tell that she's not doing so well. And the workers, and this is where I was saying she doesn't reign with quite as much authority as people think a queen bee does. When the workers, when they notice that she's starting to slack off on egg production, or if she's not healthy, or if she's just getting a little too old, the workers, through a unanimous decision, will rise up and they'll kill her. They'll execute their queen. But not after, or not before, they force her to lay new queens so that they can raise new ones up. And we call that a supersedure. But that's how a queen ends her life. She lives about 3 to 5 years if she lives naturally. I think I've even read that she can live up to 7 years. But that's not how it usually happens. She usually dies of disease, or the workers will rise up and supersede her. And so let's see. Swarms. That's the second thing. We're going to talk a lot about that here in a second. How much time do I have, by the way?
How much you need, Jan?
You better tell me a time because it's bees. I can talk all night.
About 8:15, 25 minutes. Is that enough?
Yeah, that should be enough. Okay. The second time, we'll talk about it later, is when they swarm. So when a hive fills the cavity that they're in, that's the second time that the workers sense something is going on, and they do something about it. And what they'll start doing is they'll start slimming down the queen. They'll feed her less, and they'll start pulling and tugging at her to stretch out and build up her muscles. And that's so she can leave with half to 2/3 of the hive to go find a new home. And so that's the only other time that a queen bee ever leaves the hive. That's the only other time she sees the light of day. And it's not the kind of life you typically expect when you hear a queen bee called a queen, but it's beautiful in its own way. So next thing I want to talk about is just sort of the life cycle of a beehive. So in the wintertime, they're not hibernating. That's the most common question I ever get asked about bees, is what do they do in the winter? Do they sleep? No, they don't sleep. They don't go in the ground and hibernate. They're awake, they're active all throughout the winter. And what they're doing is they are clustered. It's a little ball that they form to keep warm. And then the queen is at the center of that cluster, and they're eating the honey stores that they've provided for themselves over the past year. And that they start at the bottom, and over the winter, as they eat the honey stores, they move up. And their job is to make heat. And so I think I said it earlier, winter bees, they will live the entire winter, 3-4 months. They'll live a really long time because the queen doesn't lay anything during this time. She doesn't do her job at that time. But because of that, because the queen ceases egg laying, there are no new bees, so winter bees need to live the whole season. Now spring is where it gets exciting. Spring is every beekeeper's favorite time of the year. It's just a joyful thing. You can't do anything wrong. You can't kill your bees hardly after March or so. And everything just seems happy and good. And so beginning in February, the queen, she'll start laying. And depending on the variety of bees, it depends, that varies by the degree to which she starts laying eggs again, varies by the kind of bee it is, by the strain. But she'll start slowly laying eggs in February. And when the red maple, at least around here, starts blooming, that's when spring begins for a beehive. Because that is the first heavy pollen producing plant that they have. And like I said earlier, pollen is their protein. And so pollen is what triggers them to lay, what triggers the queen to start laying new brood in mass. Because that's the primary part of the diet for a young bee. And so spring starts with the red maple, triggering brood production. And March and April, really, it's all about building up the number of the hive. The queen, she is laying as much as she possibly can during that time. And especially if there's more pollen coming in than usual, the queen will lay more than usual. It depends on the pollen that comes in. But it involves a steady increase in the population to prepare for the nectar that's coming in April. And so in April is when you start seeing, at least around here, the major nectar flows. So the black locust trees, they produce an overwhelming amount of nectar. It's really great. And black locust honey tastes wonderful too. But they're getting ready for that black locust bloom. And so in order to take full advantage of it, they have to have a lot of bees to go out in the field and forage. So that's what early spring is all about. And pollen, pollen. Yeah, so pollen coming in promotes fruit, and the nectar that they bring in, that promotes comb building. So the queen is laying more eggs, but also they're building more room for the queen to lay eggs, and they're building more room to store honey as they get more nectar, because it's a natural part of them eating the nectar that they produce wax. In fact, if you have a full cavity, you'll find bits of wax that they just stick away. They build things just because they have to. But that's what spring is about, build up. More brood, more comb, just getting strong. And then when April and May come around, you get swarming, because in an overwintered hive, they build up early, and so they get to take advantage of those early nectar flows. And if they were around last year, the year before, they've already built out in the cavity that they're in. And so when the nectar starts coming in, they start building more and more, and the queen starts laying more and more. And when all those bees start to hatch, and they start running out of room to build things, they realize, okay, got to split. And so what they do, and I told you earlier about the queen, they slim her down, get her ready to start flying. They will also start stockpiling honey. They'll start to slow down the egg production for a little bit as they're thinning down the queen, but they'll also start backfilling all the places where she was laying with honey, so that they can survive for a little bit without a queen giving them new workers. And then when they're ready, when that queen is slimmed down enough, when they have enough stores, when they have enough bees, half to 2/3 of that hive will leave, and they'll go and they'll sit on a tree branch or on someone's car or something. I'm sure some of you have seen some of the cool YouTube videos of people scooping, clumps of bees off of a car. I do that. It's my favorite thing about the springtime. Well, I haven't done a car, but they'll go and they'll sit on something. Usually it's a tree branch, and what they're doing is they're looking for a new home. They're house hunting. And the best book that I've ever read, or I listened to an audiobook of it. It's called Honeybee Democracy. It's not the man that wrote it isn't a believer, but it's very fascinating. It's called Honeybee Democracy by Thomas Seeley, and it goes over what they're doing when they're in a cluster looking for a new home. And so what they're doing is they're sending out a few hundred bees, and these are the most experienced. They're the oldest bees that know the area well, and those bees are scout bees. And so those bees, they are flying around in about a 3 to 5 mile radius, and they're looking for little cracks and crevices in the wall, little cracks in trees. They're looking for boxes. They're looking for old refrigerators. They're looking for crates. They're looking for whatever they can find to call home. And let's see. I forgetting anything? Yeah, so they're looking for a new home, and they have a set criteria that they're looking for, and it's kind of strange because it's almost universal. No matter where in the world you go, all the bees have the same criteria that they look for, and it's about the same degree that they're looking for too. So when they're looking for a new home, they're searching for a crack or crevice, and they're looking for it to be ideally, 15 feet off the ground, so it's away from predators and things like that. And they're looking for the entrance to be about 3 square centimeters or 3 square inches, so that's easy to guard. And they're also looking for something that's about 10 gallons in volume, because that's just the ideal size for a beehive. I've seen them in far bigger places. I've seen them in smaller places. Sometimes they get desperate. But what the scout bee does is she finds that spot. She says, "Oh, this is nice. That crack up there, it's high enough off the ground. Bear's not going to come by and get me too easily. It's a good neighborhood." And then she'll go in there, and she'll mark off the dimensions, and she'll calculate the volume. And then she'll go back to that swarm, that cluster, and she'll tell the other bees about it. And she will tell them several things, but the most important are she'll tell them the exact location of that spot, even if it's 3 miles away under a bush behind the train or something like that. I don't know. She can tell them the exact location of that, and she does a little dance, the waggle dance. And we could spend a whole evening just talking about how bees communicate like that. But she's communicating the exact location, and with the intensity with which she dances, she's telling them how good it is. And there are a few other things that she communicates about it. But what she's doing is she's trying to convince her sisters that this is the place to go. And all the other scout bees, they're coming back at the same time with their own spot that they love, and they're super excited about, and they're doing their little dance too. And all the worker bees are watching. And all the worker bees, they're hearing, or not hearing, but they're seeing all the attributes of this new potential home site, and they're in a sense debating. They're trying to decide. They're hearing the scout bees, doing their dance, arguing with each other about my spot's the best, my spot's the best, and the worker bees, they hear, and they have to make a choice. And the other scout bees, what they'll actually do is if they see another scout bee that has a better spot, they'll actually go and check out that spot, and they'll come back, and if they like it more, they'll copy that dance. They'll do the same exact dance. And there might be 400 scout bees that come back to a cluster of, let's say, 15,000 bees. And in order for them to choose a home site, every single one of those bees has to agree on one spot. And the way that they determine that is all of them mimic that dance. They do the same dance. And when they all agree, they start saying, okay, we're in agreement, let's go. And so it's a little beyond theoretical. There are some people like Dr. Seeley that have seen them. They're called buzz runners. And so these bees, they realize, okay, we're ready to go. We found this great home site. Let's go. And so what they'll do is they'll run up and down on the outside of the swarm. I think I have a picture. So that's what it looks like. They'll run up and down on the outside, and they'll be making a buzzing sound, a piping sound like the queen makes. And sort of Dr. Seeley, he mentions it. It's kind of like telling the racers to start their engines and rev them up. And because it's the buzz runners telling all of these bees to get their flight muscles ready, to get them warmed up so that they can go fly for a few miles. And then they fly, and they'll go to that exact spot. And I wish I had words to describe how beautiful it is. At the conference earlier that was at South County, Dr. Brown, I think it was talking about the added beauty in creation.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's added beauty or if it's just plain beauty that's there. But when you see this or this, or that, or that, or that, or that, you see that ball of bees that you're so excited to come and get, and then you're a little late. And the buzz runners have started telling all the bees to get their flight muscles ready, and they take off. Or even if you see them land, you're seeing 10, 15,000 bees move together as a cloud with the queen at the center, and they'll pick themselves up, and you'll see it. It's just a giant cloud, and they fly up, and the sun is shining through them. And before the honeybees leave the hive, the workers, they gorge themselves on honey, so they're ready to produce comb when they get to the new site, and so they have food. And so you're seeing the sun shine through their honey-filled bellies, and you see these little specks of gold flying in the sky. And it's like a tornado of little golden flecks just buzzing around in the sky. And what's really cool about it is because they're gorged on honey and they don't have a home, they can't really sting you. They can. I got stung in the eye by a swarm, but they don't really care about stinging you. And so you can stand there in a tornado of bees flying around you, and it's beautiful. And in nature, it is probably the most beautiful thing that I've ever seen. And I don't have any videos of it. There might be a video on YouTube you could find, but yes, sir.
Historically, when were the first bees actually kept? When did beekeepers come into, a worker, as a producer for honey for society?
Yep. It's hard to say because all of the work that I've ever found on it is not from a 6-day creationist point of view. So, they'll say it was tens. I don't know. I'm not even going to give you a number. Farther back than we say it existed, but we can see them in ancient Egypt. They kept them in clay pots. The Romans kept them in tubes that they would cover the ends on. All throughout human history, you see honeybees there right alongside us, and we're keeping them for food. But yeah, anyway, swarms, they're beautiful. Let's see if there's anything I'm forgetting. They move together. Yeah. And one more thing, and this is one of my favorite pictures I've ever taken. That bee is telling all the other bees in the swarm, this is home. Because the cloud moves there, and the first bees that land, they stand next to the entrance, they stick their butts up in the air, and they fan their wings. And what she's doing right there, she's fanning this gland that's right there called the Nasonoth gland. And it smells like lemongrass. And she's telling all the other bees, this is it. This is home. This is our new place to live. And another pheromone that I have personally smelled, and I never want to smell, is their alarm smell. And I don't know what the fancy term for it is, but it smells exactly like banana taffy. I mean, I actually was going to get some banana taffy so you could smell it and say, I was going to say, that's what it smells like. You don't want to smell it. But here's some pictures of swarms. That's at Concord Plaza. That's up in Florissant. This was in Kirkwood. There's actually two here. This one was right there in this honeysuckle bush. It was probably 12 feet off the air or so. And I went to get that one, and I looked up, and there was a second one. And I was filled with joy because it's free bees. These bees are what us as beekeepers really want because they're looking for a new home. We're just going to give it to them, and they're ready. They're primed and ready to go to start a new colony.
How do you transfer those to yourself? Where you want what the
Branch, bees,
You cut a branch off or what?
box. It's fun. You just shake them. Sometimes if they're really high up in the air, like, well, I'll show you this one. This one was at a book depository place up in Florissant, and this is the first swarm that I ever saw take off and leave. And it was beautiful. They let's see if that post were here. They took off that way, and I chased them. I ran after them. I wanted to see where they were going, and they crossed a few major roads.
When you collect a swarm, do you get all of them or just?
Yeah, as many as I can. I can't get all the scout bees that are coming back because that would take all day. And that one was a huge hive. I mean, it was that tall.
Wow.
It was in a friend of mine in his orchard. I think that's an almond tree or something. This was one in Arnold. That one was really high up. I couldn't shake the branch on that one. I had to get a pole saw and stand at the top of the ladder. And instead of using the saw, I had a bucket. Actually, I guess I did shake it. I tied a bucket to the end of the pole saw, stood at the very top of a ladder, fully extended, and did that. But that swarms. It's probably the most fascinating thing that there is about bees because they communicate, they vote. They make unanimous decisions to go places. They can communicate very precise information through pheromones, through a little waggle dance. They have a language that they speak to one another. That's cool.
Wonderful.
Okay, and then the next thing that happens is the summer. Swarming dies down. Summer is all about food. And so they go and gather for all the flowers in the summer. Sometimes there are big nectar flows, and it's different depending on where you live. And so there will be a lot of flowers blooming. The clover is the main one here. And then there will be the dearth. And for us, that's late July. And that's when it gets so hot, the flowers aren't producing. There's not much rain. So there isn't much for them to go out and get. And that's when we see robbing. So other bees will come in and they'll kill another hive and steal all their food. That hive back there, actually, that's what happened to that one. And this is when the hive population begins to fall. It peaks in about July, and then it starts going down. So it takes 3 weeks for a worker to come out of her cell. So the queen, the egg production peaks in about May, but the population peaks in July. And as beekeepers, we try to keep track of that. But in the fall, and this is where we're going into now. In the summertime, by the way, that's when we harvest our honey, because that's when there's the most food on there. But going into the fall, the queen starts to slow down her egg production, and all the places where she was laying, the worker bees, they start to backfill, and they wait for the big nectar flows in the fall. For us, it's goldenrod, and it's starting to bloom, and I'm so happy. And so they start backfilling it, and one of those deep boxes back there is how much honey they need to make it through the winter. And then, of course, they kick all the men out. Yes, sir.
You know, John, this time of year right now.
Yeah.
When my boys were little 1,000 years ago and they were playing soccer in the fall, starting in September, there were more bees flying around these soccer fields than you can imagine. In fact, we used to go to the concession stand and buy cups of orange soda and put them away from the bleachers to try and attract them away.
Yeah.
Why is it that there's so many of them flying around this time of year?
Well, right now, this time of year, it's sort of a transition period. There's not much going on right now. Although this year it's pretty good, but when the goldenrod starts to bloom, they won't do that as much. Because before the goldenrod blooms, they're looking for anything. Like I said, they'll go and kill other hives just to get their food. They'll slurp up the trash from a snow cone place if they go after it. That's probably what was going on. But starting about now, that starts to slow down because the goldenrod starts to bloom, and the goldenrod gets so heavy with nectar that it bends down. The bees love it. I love it because the bees love it. So that's the life of a beehive. They go through the winter. In the springtime, they build up. Then if they're strong, they split. They go swarm, and it's beautiful. It's wonderful. It's very fascinating. Summertime, they make honey, and they survive, and they get ready for winter. Fall, they start bundling up, and then the process starts over again. And yeah, I'm in awe of it. I hope you are too. Let's save the rest of the questions for now. I just want to go over a few things. Langstroth. This is Lorenzo Langstroth. Very cool name. He lived in the 1800s, latter half of the 1800s. And he was a Congregationalist minister up in, I think, Pennsylvania or Massachusetts, somewhere around there. He was trained at Yale. I don't know what the Yale Divinity School was like at that time, but probably wasn't great. But I've read some of his stuff, and it's pretty good. He's the father of American beekeeping. Really, he's the father of modern beekeeping because he discovered one thing, and it was very important. He discovered bee space. And so I told you about the comb that they built, and I told you about the propolis. The propolis they use to seal up tiny things. And the comb they build when there's a cavity. If it's over 3/8 of an inch, they build comb. If it's below 3/8 of an inch, they seal it up with propolis. And if it's in between, they don't do anything. And so that's how he made his second major contribution to beekeeping and really to agriculture as a whole. He designed that box back there. And that is called a Langstroth hive. That is the kind of beehive that is used everywhere today. It's at least it's the most prominent, and it was the first really successful hive design where you could keep bees in it, and you could remove the combs and inspect them. You could manipulate the bees, and it changed the world. Some people call it the fourth agricultural revolution. And so he invented this. And here's this quote I love: "The Creator may be seen in all the works of his hands, but in few more directly than the wise economy of the honeybee." And let me tell you where that's found. It's found in a book he wrote called The Hive and the Honeybee, which was a practical treatise on beekeeping. And I have several slides of quotes. I'm not going to read all of them to you, but after every point that he makes, he basically says, look at how this points to a creator. In fact, I wanted to share one with you. First of all, he says several times that bees were made to serve mankind. They were made for our benefit. Let's see. He uses actually let's see. Okay, somewhere he says in his introduction to the book, and this is the last thing I'll say. He says it's of a special interest to clergymen to look at honeybees, because just like it was the practice of our Lord and Master to look at nature and use that to illustrate his teachings, that should be our practice too. And so we should be able to look at nature and the things that God has made and the things that are common to man, the things that we do, the things that we see every day, and use those to illustrate the things that we teach. And this is one of the ways that he does that. And he does it in his book, which is fascinating. If a hive goes queenless, if the queen dies, sometimes they won't accept a new queen. And they'll just enjoy having all the honey and none of the responsibilities. And he says it's, young men, don't be like these queenless hives that just won't accept a new queen. Don't push off putting to death sin, because the longer you go, the harder it will be to put to death. The longer you go not following the Lord, the harder it will be to turn around and follow him. And so it's gold. And honey is gold too. That's all. And I hope that helps you in some way to just be in awe of our Creator.
Well, I'm sure you got questions. I got the first one.
Okay.
So you got bees
Yes.
that are essentially guarding the door
Yes.
so that they can't keep invaders out,
Yes.
including other bees.
Yes.
Do they have like home and away uniforms or?
Kind of. They smelled it.
Okay.
But if a foreign bee comes in with food, they get let in. And when we set up our apiaries, that's what we call our bee yards. We actually will face one beehive that way, and we'll face the other this way, and we'll stagger, because bees drift as they come home, and they naturally tend to drift to the outside. So if you have a row of 4 that are all facing the same direction, the ones on the end will end up as the strongest, because they come home to the wrong hive and they're bringing food, so they get brought in. Yeah.
Well, other questions?
Yes, sir.
Our neighbors had a big oak tree in the backyard, and it got cut down. There was a big beehive up in there.
Yeah.
So the bees all just came out. And the guy across the street, the beekeeper, and him and some guys put boxes out in the yard.
Yeah.
And the bees eventually went into those boxes, but it wasn't like a swarm. But how does that happen? Like, they cut the tree down.
Yeah, what he probably did was I'm assuming, he went into that log and he cut out some of the comb until he found the queen. And then he took the queen, and we have special little clips called queen clips. And it's big enough that a worker can get in, but a queen can't get out. So the workers can feed her. But clip the queen and stuck her in one of the boxes. And the workers, they follow the queen wherever she goes. So in those swarms, the other way I catch them is if I can find the queen, I just put the queen in the clip and put her in the box. And then I set the box near the clump, and they'll all move in. So that's probably what he did.
Took a while,
Yeah, it does take a little while, especially if it's an established colony.
several days.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yes, ma'am.
How do you know how much honey to take? How?
Okay, so we have deep boxes and we have medium boxes, or they're shallow. And so there are two schools of thought. You can give them 2 deep boxes, and anything you put above those 2 deep boxes, you consider surplus honey,
Okay,
because they keep around the brood, which is what those 2 boxes are for. They store honey in there, and so you just take off whatever's excess. And what I've been trying lately, and what is becoming more popular, is you give them 1 box, which is enough for the queen to lay in, but not enough for them to store any extra honey. So they'll have a box that's just got brood in it, and they put all of their honey above, and
okay,
you take all of it, and so they have nothing left. But then you immediately start feeding them, and you do it about this time, and they start backfilling the cells that had baby bees in it with honey, because one of those boxes is all they need to get through the winter.
Oh.
Yeah, and we feed sugar water.
okay.
Yes, sir.
How much production do you have in your,
I've got about a dozen hives.
do you just use all your own production, or do you sell it to somebody, or what do you do with it?
I sell it. Yeah, yeah. I didn't get much this year. I got, well, it's a lot. It's not that much. 20 gallons or so of honey.
So are there big farms? Is that where all the honey comes from?
Yeah.
And
So
they have what? How many hives? Just
a good size bee farm will have 400 hives. Some of the really big ones will have thousands. But you're talking about a really, really big operation. But the small, or not small, your average bee farmer has probably around 400 hives. So I don't have very many. Yes, sir.
What about colony? What's this colony collapse syndrome?
Colony collapse. It's colony collapse disorder, and it's not a particular disease. It's not a particular issue. It's just sort of a term that was given to a whole collection of problems that the bees have. So the varroa mite, which came over in the 1980s, changed beekeeping. The small hive beetle, foul brood, American and European, chalk brood, all of these different things put together that were negatively affecting the honeybee. And so it about 10 or 15 years ago, it was really, really bad. And that's when you probably heard a lot about colony collapse disorder, because there were some hives that were just, they just absconded, they left because the things weren't being taken care of. Our treatments for those things weren't as good. But now it's not as big a problem. Let's see, he had his hand up a while.
Yeah, I have some friends that are
Yes.
beekeepers. We buy honey from them, and
Yes.
they're harvesting this time of year. Before I came here, I went up to pick our honey, and they gave me some honeycomb for show and tell, and I told them I was coming here.
Oh, cool.
So,
Okay. Yes, sir.
So you had mentioned something about how when you start seeing those little queen cups.
Yeah.
Get formed and everything, you said when you see those things, you know you've got something to do.
Yes.
What is that a special trigger?
That's a good point. So if I start seeing queen cups, especially if they're at the bottom, it's not all the time, that means they're going to swarm. That means that I've let them get a little too strong, or I haven't given them enough room. So that means they're getting cramped and they're making new queens, and I'm about to lose half of my bees. So that means I need to split them. So I'll take those frames, those combs with queen cells on there, and I'll take those and I'll put them in other boxes, and I'll take one hive and I'll turn it into 4. They'll be weaker. I won't get any honey out of them that year, but I'll have 4 hives.
Right.
And I won't lose bees.
Interesting.
Yes, ma'am. You had a question.
I've heard that honey is one of the few foods that does not boil. What keeps honey from boiling?
It has a high acidity, and the moisture content is low. So the bees, they fan the nectar until it's down to like 18, 19, 20% moisture content, and that's too low for most bacteria and things to grow. And then they seal it, and they keep it at that moisture content. The quality of the honey, can't really. There definitely is. It depends on the kind of flowers that they're going to, which is up. It depends on the location. trying to keep track. I think you had,
I think it's fascinating. You mentioned that you think the honeybee is made for man.
yeah.
And what's interesting, how quickly someone found out that with just a little bit of smoke, those barred bees just behave themselves. You can work with them. What did the smoke do to those barred bees?
So remember that alarm pheromone that I said I don't want to smell that smells like banana tapping? It keeps that smell from spreading. Or it keeps them from being able to pick it up or like to sense that pheromone. And also it makes them think, oh, there's a fire. I got to go, eat some honey and get out of here. Not leave, but, get away from the fire. Yeah. Yes,
How much effort do you have to put in to keep from being stung?
being stung.
Yeah.
Okay, I do a lot because I have very bad reactions to these things. I have an EpiPen I carry and everything. If my seasonal allergies are bad at the same time I get stung, and it's my first thing of the year, I could have an anaphylactic reaction. It never happened before, but it's come really close.
You like something on the edge.
Yeah, but I have a full suit. Well, actually, it's half a suit. I wear jeans, which they can't really sting through. It's a jacket. It's kind of a thick cotton. And then I have a veil that zippers shut to it that I can see through, but they can't get to. And I wear gloves. They're like a goat skin, goat leather glove. Comes all the way around. Yes, sir.
Two questions. I know that Thomas Jefferson at his Mount Vernon has had a collection of tomato producing. The founding fathers, did any of them have beehives, or was it a typical thing in an agricultural farm to have beehives? And also too, when the settlers came over from England and other places, did they bring the bees with them, or did they just use the bees for other years?
Yeah, so they brought bees with them. So the honeybee that we're looking at, the honeybee as we know it, is not native. In fact, there are a lot of people starting to say now, oh, we can't keep bees because they're an invasive species. Yeah, no, they were brought over from Europe, and they were, yeah, a lot of people kept them. It was a necessary thing. That's how you got your candle wax. That's how you got a really significant source of calories in the honey. And one interesting thing is because of swarming, and at the time, back in the 1700s, that kind of beekeeping equipment didn't exist. They kept them in skeps. They were basically inverted with baskets. You couldn't keep them from swarming. You just had to let them swarm and go and catch it. But you can't catch all of them. And so a swarm, it would go ahead of the colonists, go ahead of colonization efforts. And it would sort of prepare the land for the colonists as they moved across the continent. Because swarms, they would just keep doing their thing. They go found a new colony, and bees at that time, they didn't have anywhere near the kind of problems that they have today because of global trade. But they go a few miles down the road, start a colony. Next year, they do the same thing, and they do the same thing, and they would just keep going. But yeah, it was really common.
So that's not native.
Not
Bees
native.
are not native.
Not native to the United States. They're the kind of bees that you see mostly here in America today. They're mostly Italian honeybees. So it's Apis mellifera ligustica. The other kind that's common is the Carniolan honeybee from, I guess that's the south bit of Austria or something like that.
Okay.
And then Russian bees are popular too. And actually, the colonists that came over from Europe to on our country, they had German honeybees. That's what was really popular until the tracheal mite decimated the population. And so then you had a Catholic priest, father or brother Adam. He came up with the buckfast bee, which had a significant resistance to tracheal mites. And so tracheal mites weren't a problem anymore. And then there was another happy time, and then some kind of foul brood disease came by, and then things were bad. And we found a cure for it. And now the varroa mite is the worst possible thing. It's like a little tick for bees, and they spread a lot of diseases. They make bees just very sick.
So
And,
that's from the flowers. Is that the mites that get on flowers?
they spread it from bee to bee, pretty much. And the varroa mite actually comes from Africa. Yes.
Sorry. You may have already been getting at this. Will different species of honeybee hybridize in nature?
Yes.
Will that ever happen naturally? Okay. And when that happens, does that produce a new, are those like distinguishable like hybrid species that they have different characteristics or?
Yeah, well, the ones that are like through selective breeding, that are hybrids that, we can identify them. But other than coloration and maybe some of their attributes, like carniolan bees, in February and March, they don't steadily increase their population. They explode, and sometimes they're up to the detriment. They just lay as many eggs as possible. Russian honeybees, the queen cups I was telling you about, they always have a few just in case. So if you have Russian honeybees, don't worry about them as much. But there are things like that, and so the bees that we have here, they're not pure Italian honeybees. They're not pure carniolan bees. They're not pure Russian, because that's something about honeybees is you can't control how you breed them. Because the drones, they fly out and they go to those drone congregating areas, and your virgin queen, she goes and she flies to that drone congregating area. You have no control over what drone she mates with. And so the way that they do the selective breeding is they have islands off the coast of the country that have no other bees within flying distance, and they forcibly do it. And they can also artificially inseminate mates, but that's not as common. Okay.
How about two more, and then John will be at the table and be able to answer all the questions you want.
Yes, sir.
How important are bees in pollination? And then if there weren't any bees, how would pollination occur?
It's hard to say because, there's a big group of people that have made it their mission to say that if bees disappear, the world will end. And we know that the world's not going to end. It's not going to end until the Lord comes. But that wouldn't be very good, because all of our agricultural crops, almost all of them, rely on honeybees, European honeybees, for their pollination. Is that the right word? Pollinating, whatever it is.
Well, before the Europeans came here, if there were no bees in North America, does that mean that there weren't many fruit plants?
No, there are all kinds, but there are different kinds of bees. So the bees that were here weren't honeybees.
Oh.
They were solitary bees. I think bumblebees were here, but there are an innumerable amount of native bees. And when people say save the bees, what they really should be talking about is save those native bees, those native pollinators, because we're killing their environments, and there are some of those native pollinators that they may only pollinate a specific plant, and that plant may only be pollinated by that specific bee. And so we need those native pollinators too. But yeah, there are native things that we're
One other question about bumblebees.
Yeah.
When I was a kid, we used to see bumblebees around a lot, but seems like these days I never see a bumblebee.
I don't see many either. I don't know why.
That's a good point.
Yeah. Yes, sir.
Africanized bees.
There
was a big deal on movies.
Yeah, they're a big deal. Not here very much. We get them a little bit because if we have a really warm year, we'll get them here. I've never seen them, but especially here in St. Louis, because we're right along the river, they'll swarm and they'll get on a barge, and the barge will come up the river, and then we'll have them here. But they won't last long. They really need warmer climates. But yeah, they're nasty. They'll if you mess with the hive, it's not just a few of them that are going to come out and bother you while you're near them. They're going to chase you, a dozen yards, and they're a whole bunch of them. That'll come up.
Interesting.
Yeah.
All right, so. So one thing I figured out, I was at Chick-fil-A the other day and I got a sandwich with honey mustard sauce. So the workers must have gone to a mustard plant, right?
don't think so.
All right, well, thank you, everybody, for coming. Thank you for those who watched on YouTube. Like, it's always amazing to look at the animals, which is what we have the zoo tour for, and this was absolutely amazing to me, and I know it is to you as well. We say a quick prayer and we'll close, and John will be at his table back there. Don't forget, we've got $5 for everything except 2 items back there if you're interested.